Good evening, everyone. I am your host, the Historian of Horror, and I welcome you to the year 1898. Unfortunately, this year is riddled with lost films, with only a few select titles known to have survived. Even though there are many lost films, this year is a landmark for horror as Japan and the US see their first titles. The Japanese film company, Konishi Honten, which would later become Konica, released two horror films, both written by Ejiro Hatta. These were Shinin No Sosei, also known as The Resurrection of a Corpse, and Bake Jizo, also known as Jizo the Spook. Resurrection of a Corpse told the story of a dead man, played by Hatta, who comes back to life after having fallen from a coffin that two men were carrying. There are no records of the plot, cast, or crew for Bake Jizo. However, it is assumed that the plot may have been based on the Japanese legend of the Jizo statues. In Japan, Jizo is a deity who is seen as the guardian of children, particularly children who have died before their parents. And the presence of the word bake, which can be translated to spook, ghost, or phantom, may imply a haunted or possessed statue. Sadly, these films and many other countless pieces of Japanese art were lost in the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 and the fire bombings of World War II. From the UK, we have George Albert Smith's Photographing a Ghost, which may be considered the first film that touched on paranormal investigation, a genre that has found a new surge of popularity with the Conjuring, Insidious, and Paranormal Activity films. Unfortunately, this film and all stills are considered lost. However, we have record of a review by Edison Films in 1900 stating this film depicts a photographer who is attempting to take a picture of a ghost who has been carried in a trunk by two men. The photographer carefully opens a trunk and uprises a tall white phantom. The ghost continues to mystify and frustrate the photographer until he finally gives up. George would also film his first adaptation of the Faust legend with Faust and Mephistopheles, in which Satan conjures a vision of a girl for whom an old man signs a pact and is made young. Once again, this film is considered lost. From George Méliès, we have two lost films. The first film is The Accursed Cave, also known as The Cave of Demons, numbered 164 in the Star film catalogs. The plot is about a young woman who stumbles across a cave that is populated by spirits and skeletons of people who died there under mysterious circumstances. The second lost film is The Damnation of Faust, which is the third Faust film from Méliès. This would eventually be remade in 1903 under the same title. Fortunately for us, Méliès' most impressive film to date did survive. Méliès' film, The Astronomer's Dream, once again centers around the theme of dreaming and space, with the moon acting as an antagonist to this poor astronomer. The use of a giant moon was used similarly before in his 1896 film A Nightmare, and will later be used as the focal point of the 1903 classic A Trip to the Moon. This film shows off all the tight editing techniques from Méliès and tells a complete story better than his previous films. This is truly one I would recommend watching all the way through. It's still impressive to this day. The final film from this year comes to us from the US, out of Edison Studios and directed by Edwin S. Porter. The Cavalier's Dream is debatably the first horror film from the US, unless you consider The Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots from 1895 as the first. The Cavalier's Dream depicts a man falling asleep at a table with a witch coming over to create the illusion of a table full of food, only to be disrupted by Mephistopheles, who taunts and torments the man until he finally wakes up. In closing, this year showed us that other countries were beginning to get into the horror genre, and that the theme of Faust and spirits would remain dominant for years to come. However, we have Méliès to thank once again for really bringing forth the theme of space exploration as another viable subject for film. Come back for the next episode where we will close out the 19th century. Stay scary.